Hey, I'm Braun-Duin here, Tom Ross, for a deck tech for the basically green-white but somewhat Naya Enchantfall deck. I don't know exactly what to call it. It's basically an enchantment deck that uses landfall. So let's go ahead and take a look at the deck. Basically, this deck was a 4 a.m. brainchild of mine, which is why it looks like a pile. Where I wanted to play with the retreats with as many things that interacted with them as possible. So originally the deck was Abzan, and I had retreats to Hagra as well. So I had all the retreats except the red and the blue one, and a bunch of things like explosive vegetation and stuff. So you'd play a bunch of retreats, play an explosive vegetation or a Nissa's renewal, put a bunch of lands in play, and do a bunch of cool things.
It's almost 12 treat, but it's only 8 treat.
Yeah, it's only 8 treat. The deck is a real treat, though.
Right in time for Halloween.
Yeah. Candy corn is in the sideboard. But yeah, so that was the original idea behind the deck, but it just seemed bad. But as I was building it, I realized that I was playing like 16 enchantments because I had all the retreats in Zendikar's Royal. So I decided that Herald of the Pantheon might be pretty good. And then I thought, why don't I just make it an enchantment/landfall hybrid deck? So we're really going deep here, but we have Herald of the Pantheon, which is going to reduce the cost of all these enchantments and also gain me a life when I play them. And then a lot of these enchantments are landfall based. So Zendikar's Royal doesn't actually have landfall, but that's basically what it is. And then both of the retreats are landfall. And to go with that, we actually have 12 fetch lands. So because of the new mana, we can actually use these fetches pretty well. So we have Windswept Heath and Wooded Foothills, which get all of our duels, and then Flooded Strand only gets Canopy Vista, but can also get Plains. So we have a lot of Plains to get with Flooded Strand if we need to, but we can also get Canopy Vistas. And then both Windswept and Woodeds can get the 2 forests or all 6 duels. And that way our mana actually is probably going to be pretty good. Our lands are going to all come into play untapped for the most part. We're going to probably be able to cast most of our spells pretty much on curve. And we also have 12 fetches, which means that we're going to get double triggers out of a lot of these landfall things. So there is a lot of cool interactions there. Hangerback's in the deck just because it's a really good card. Really doesn't have any synergy with the deck, but why not? So yeah, it does have. Yeah, Tom actually pointed out a good thing. It does have a little bit of synergy with Retreat to Kazandu, where we can put a +1/+1 counter on it with landfall. That actually can make it pretty big.
Or if your guy somehow dies, and you could start antheming with your Retreat to Emeria.
Yeah, that also works too. You know, if we have like 3 or 4 counters on them, dies, get a bunch of flyers, play a fetch land, you know, maybe +2/+2 our flyers and hit them for 12 or something. And then beyond that, we have pretty classic enchantment theme. We have Silk Wraps, Stasis Snares as removal, Myth Realized, because other than Herald and Hangerback, every card in the deck does trigger Myth Realized. So it's just a really cheap enchantment that goes with the enchantment theme, but also is going to get counters as we play these other things. And then, of course, Sigil of the Empty Throne is our top-end finisher, along with Zendikar's Royal. And then we have 1 Quarantine Field, which is a new card from Battle for Zendikar. Kind of an really weirdly worded card, but it basically is white, and then double X. So for 4 mana, it gets 1 counter. For 6, it gets 2. For 8, it gets 3. And it comes into play, and it exiles as many permanents your opponent controls equal to the number of counters on it until it leaves the battlefield and they come back. So it's basically like a mega Oblivion Ring, sort of. But with Herald of the Pantheon, we can actually reduce the cost of X. So not hugely reduce it, but like if we have 1 Herald in play, we can pay 3 mana to exile a guy versus having to normally pay 4. So just kind of a big removal spell, but something that's going to be able to take care of planeswalkers and things that we otherwise can't deal with. And one last thing, I guess, is I want to say that I nicknamed the deck Can't Beat Ugin. So basically this deck is 0% against Ugin. Yeah, I guess we have Hangerback Walker. I don't think that beats it. So it's a green elemental. So yeah, we're basically 0% against Ugin. So this is a don't play against Ugin deck. But anyway, let's go ahead and look at the sideboard and see what we have there. All right, so here we are at the sideboard, and one thing you might notice is we actually have a lot of red spells in our sideboard, and our main deck contains 0. However, we did have 2 Cinderglades, which can be fetched off of Wooded Foothills and Windswept Heath. So we have actually 10 red sources in our deck. that doesn't actually hurt our mana base at all, and that lets us play these sideboard cards. And I felt like green-white alone wasn't going to be enough, and we needed something like Radiant Flames as a sweeper effect, along with some other enchantments to help us in grindier matchups. So against things like control decks, we want to be able to side into like Gideon, which is going to provide us with a lot of advantage, but also Outpost Siege and Goblin Slide generate a lot of advantage. Much like Myth Realized, Goblin Slide is going to trigger off of almost everything we cast. We can make a bunch of goblins that way, and retreat to Emeria actually can pump our goblins. So that's actually a neat little interaction there. We have 1 Molten Vortex. We actually have 25 lands, which seems like a lot because we're kind of landfall themed. So in a lot of matchups, such as against aggressive decks that have a lot of 2 toughness creatures, or even against control decks where we want to just have some extra reach, we can bring in a Molten Vortex and turn our extra lands into damage. A couple more quarantine fields for big things. Think stuff like Siege Rhino or Obnixilis or Ugin or other things that we can just otherwise never beat. Well, not never, but have a hard time beating. We want to bring in quarantine field for those, and then Gideon as stated, and then Outpost Siege for control decks or grindy mid-range decks, because we don't actually have a source of card advantage in this deck.
When Eidolon Countless or Blossoms left, and you don't really have enough ways to get your enchantments in the graveyard for Starfield Nyx.
Yeah. There's no Eidolon, no Courser anymore, so we don't have a source of card advantage, and it's possible that actually Outpost Siege might supposed to be main, just because we may find ourselves running out of gas too often in our main deck. But anyway, that's the deck for Naya enchantments or green, white, splash red, or Can't Beat Ugin, whatever you want to call it. Make sure you stay. Yeah, 8 treat. I like 8 treat. Make sure you stay tuned for the match itself. See how this deck fares against Mono Red.